Hi, everybody. I am so excited to be with you all today. My name is Sylvia Sanchez, and I work at Ava Labs as the project manager of an initiative called Owl Explains. Next slide, please. All right. Oh, the clicker. Thank you. Okay, so Owl Explains is an educational initiative headed by our legal team at Ava Labs, focusing on blockchain, crypto, and Web3 policy and regulation. Our mantra is more hoot, less hype, and you will see why in a bit. But before I continue, I just want to clarify that none of this is financial or legal advice. This is provided for informational and educational purposes only. And with that, I would like to ask just a general question, and it's how many of you have had weird or particular reactions from people when you tell them that you're working in blockchain? And I'm referring to people not in the industry because I think that it's quite easy when you're with your crypto bros, with the people in blockchain, because they understand what you're doing and it's a beautiful community. I think that one of my favorite things about working in Web3 and blockchain is the great synergies and just this sense of unity. But this is not always the case with everybody. Not everybody seems to understand what blockchain is, and there can be some difficult reactions, especially what we see with some regulators, which is why we do what we do at Owl Explains. So following the theme of the owl, today we're going to represent that with the analogy of a tree. The tree of Web3 wisdom that is divided into 5 different branches. So these are 5 different points to help guide the thinking of policymakers everywhere, considering how to regulate blockchain, crypto, and Web3. Because we have the soil. Innovation is the soil from which we can build a better internet. And blockchain is the root system, decentralized, traceable, secure. And this leads us to a hot topic, of course, regulation. And just to be clear, this is not an argument for super strict regulation or, oh, you have to go and regulate everything. We don't think that way. But this is not an argument for no regulation either. It's an argument for workable regulation. Because sensitive regulation is how we guide the transformative power of blockchain, of Web3, to drive economic inclusion and foster innovation. So with that, we're going to kick it off with branch number 1. Understand the technology. Because before you're going to plant a tree, before you're going to do something, you need to understand what you're getting into, understand the climate, the soil, the environment. The same thing applies if you're a regulator or somebody in the space, and you're going to make these rules, these policies for blockchain. You need to know what it is. So the way that we like to see it is that blockchains allow for the building of better infrastructure for the internet. It makes it safer, more open, more secure, and it enables new use cases and business models. The cool thing about blockchain is that it allows for digital ownership and the transfer of value across the internet with enhanced transparency, auditability, programmability, and scale. So that message then gives us the chance to tell the blockchain story in an affirmative way. And we then follow with the 3 hard problems in computer science that blockchain solves, which are the following. Number 1, how do you get a disparate group of computers to agree on a common data set? Number 2, how do you establish digital uniqueness? And number 3, once you've got digital uniqueness, how do you establish and transfer ownership? So that main message of blockchain, plus the 3 hard problems discussion, is the opening that we use in our discussions and our presentations with policymakers so that they can really understand the technology from an anchored standpoint of real-world applications that go way beyond crypto trading. Because the cool thing is that users can program on these databases to leverage their computing power and pretty much create anything that people's creativity can imagine. So, branch number 2. Beware of misconceptions. So we've already understood what blockchain is, but now we really need to make sure we can make that distinction between what blockchain is not. Because unfortunately, we are in an industry in which there are a lot of headlines, a lot of news articles that don't really help us, that are full of hype, of fear, or just misinformation in general. So I have picked out 4 that are more yeah, just to highlight, but I'm sure that we could spend all afternoon talking about misconceptions and then the truth versus the lie, that kind of challenge. So one very common one is that blockchain is synonymous with cryptocurrencies, because you can tell somebody you're working in blockchain, you're at a gym, you're at an airplane, they're like, oh, what do you do? Oh, I work at a blockchain company. Oh, so you're a Bitcoin trader, which is not necessarily the case, because blockchains facilitate crypto assets, but they also facilitate many other types of activities by allowing data integrity and digital uniqueness through tokenization. And that's the key word. Tokenization simply means to represent something on a blockchain. And from there we get the word token, which is just a digital representation of something on the blockchain. It can be an asset, an item, a bundle of rights, whatever it is. And it's this thing, tokenization, which allows an item's ownership to be established and transferred globally on one or more blockchain networks. And here's a key thing that we like to really make sure that regulators understand, and it's the fact that when you tokenize an item, you are not changing its essential nature any more than describing it on a piece of paper changes it. And you can tokenize whatever you want, a box of blueberries, a pair of shoes, whatever. We have other misconceptions around, for example, DeFi, when people think that, oh, it's just about financial instruments, which is just part of the story, but in general, we like to see it as an avenue to democratize commercial systems through blockchains and smart contracts, replacing traditional intermediaries with inbuilt trust mechanisms. And another misconception is that blockchain is inherently anonymous and untraceable, and this leads to the association of illicit activities. But the thing is that there are people problems that are not necessarily the fault of the technology. So if you go and blame it all on the technology, when in reality it's an issue of the people using it, then we have a bit of trouble. And then another misconception around NFTs. They're like, oh, okay, so you're trading NFTs, you're selling really expensive pictures of monkeys, but that's not all there is in the NFT market. For example, we recently did a podcast with people from Balcony, which is a company that uses NFTs to certify real estate transactions in the US government. So that's one of the many applications. And I'm sure that as the tech evolves, we're going to have many more misconceptions, misunderstandings, and it is our job, whether you are a developer, a creator, or just somebody else working with blockchain, to really make sure that the people around you and the regulators as a whole understand what it is and what it's not. Slide number 3, branch number 3. Classify tokens sensibly. So coming back to the analogy of a tree, just as we have a biological taxonomy that categorizes different groups of plants, we need to employ a sensible system that classifies the tokens, because the advent of these custom blockchains is just going to keep on increasing and enhancing the use cases. Tokenization of assets is just a part of the story, so we need to create a sensible token classification system, because the problem is that some definitions are too broad. The thing is that you can notice this by the exceptions and all the narrowings following these definitions, by the asterisks, by all the small letterings. And the big mistake is that in some cases, they use a one-size-fits-all approach, or lumping all crypto assets as the same thing, when in reality, it's so heterogeneous, it's so diverse. So when policymakers and regulators create definitions of what is regulated, they need to recognize that if you have broad definitions, you're just going to lead to confusion, to unintended consequences, and you're just going to limit the use of anywhere else establishing ownership. So what do? Learning the nature of a token, that is the starting point to understanding how can you treat it and how you can use the valuation, the utilization, and the legal treatment. So over here, we have a category of tokens that we created, and this is part of a paper that I helped co-write on different categories of tokens. And the key thing is that we recognize the nature of a token by asking, what is it doing? Is it a physical asset that is being represented, an intangible item like music rights, patents, trademarks? Is it a service token, like the cloud storage or event tickets? A stable coin, which is designed to be stable relative to a fiat currency, or a native DLT token. We call these the heartbeat of blockchain because they are essential to the functioning of a blockchain. For example, Bitcoin with the Bitcoin blockchain, AVAX with the Avalanche blockchain, and so on. And if you're curious about exploring more about this, you can scan the code on the top right, and it will lead you to a whole set of resources and text around sensible token classification. All right, branch number 4. And in case you didn't, just feel free to, to ask me for it or go to owlexplains.com, and there's all about sensible token classification. Branch number 4. Okay, now that we understand what blockchain is, what it's not, and these different categories of tokens, how can we enact this regulation? Because just as plants need specific care depending on the type of thing that they are, you can't treat a tropical hibiscus flower like a desert cactus. Same thing here. So appropriate laws and regulations traditionally have been determined according to the type of asset or technology and its context, like how is it being used, by whom, and the associated risks. So we need to align with the guiding principles, and the way we like to summarize it is that what has been regulated, I think, sorry, because somebody can come and just help me fix my mic on. Okay, there, sorry, can you guys still hear me? I feel like it just got tangled with my hair. But anyway, is it good? Yeah, just with the mic that is like falling off with my, so sorry. Oh, good. Just like tighten it up a little bit more, just so that because it was like, thank you. Anyway, so the aligning principles that we have would be same asset, same risk, same regulation, or same activity, same risks, same regulation. And another thing is that there are many Web2 activities that are not regulated, like internet service providers, email, software development, while the regulators are seeking to regulate Web3 activities, like operating validators, personal wallets. So we need to show the confluence here so that if the regulation of technology, if it happens, is truly activity-based and not technology-based. Because drawing these comparisons is also important to avoid absurd results, like applying AML requirements to people just operating a validator node. Because here's the thing, responsible actors want sensible policies that incentivize good behavior, but that also punish the bad actors and regulate the intermediaries, not the technology. And this is also a call to action, because if you're a developer, if you're a creator in this space, and you're like, okay, but I'm not really working with regulators, it's just an encouragement to work closely with the trade bodies, the trade associations, so that we as an industry can hone in the messaging and make sure that the people making the laws, regulations that are going to affect our industry are going to do so in a wise and a sensible way that fosters the innovation. And another thing is that we live in a day and age in which many innovative programs and features on a blockchain are run by autonomously functioning code. So its role needs to be carefully considered when regulating. And number 5, okay, when and where do we need regulation? And I'm sure that this can be a big topic that we continue to disseminate, and that there are a lot of different applications to it, but just a way to summarize it is that we need this regulation when there is a lack of well-defined regimes for assets. For example, native DLT tokens lack a consistent set of functions and features, and it's sensible to regulate the intermediaries of this. And branch number 5, think global. Because these systems don't stop at a border, but are interconnected with each other. And if we acknowledge this, we can actually help them thrive and enhance the applications. Because the growing reliance of the internet for communications, entertainment, commerce demands policies that foster innovation, promote inclusion, and support the digital infrastructure, the hardware and the software. But the thing is that it's definitely a challenge, especially when it comes to balancing innovation with consumer protection and regulatory frameworks. Because just like the internet, there is a need for a coordinated regulatory approach based on market-first principles like disclosure, market integrity, anti-fraud, privacy, operational integrity, and many more. And notice that I said coordinated regulation, not harmonized regulation, because we hear a lot about harmonization and harmonized regulations, and it's a word that really twinkles the ear, but it's not really so feasible to achieve. And in fact, if you're curious about this, we're releasing a podcast next month focusing on why we can't really have harmonized, but should instead focus on having coordinated regulation. Just this alignment. We don't expect every single country, every single jurisdiction to have the same blockchain set of policies or regulations, because that's just not realistic. But if we have these certain principles, these similarities, it can be much easier also when you're at the regulating side and at the user side. So here's the recap of the tree of Web3 wisdom, or just the step or the way that we like to approach the policymakers, the regulators, both in the US, in the EU, and beyond, when we're telling them, okay, we are a part of Avalanche, we're part of this blockchain ecosystem, and it's just walking them through this journey so that it can be a more informed regulatory dialogue. Because in conclusion, blockchain technology holds the potential to reduce friction and empower communities, but if we have sensible policies, we can go even further, because trends come and go, prices rise and fall, but that's a different story. But if you're a quality builder, you'll keep creating new and exciting ways to use blockchain technology for a multitude of purposes. And as such, we need policies, regulations that make it easier for us to thrive. So that's my presentation, and if you're curious to learn more, you can follow us on Owl Explains. It's literally just Owl Explains. On Twitter, on LinkedIn, we post a lot of regulatory updates, comment letters where we write to these regulatory bodies when they seek feedback, and also talk to them directly in the podcast. So if you're curious for more, I'm sure you'll find something interesting. Thank you all so much.